Uh, okay, good afternoon to all of you. First of all, let me commence today's proceedings, welcoming all of you who are joining with us for the public seminar on vulnerability and deprivation in Sri Lanka today. Rethinking social safety nets. That's the topic today. So this webinar is organized by the Center for Banking Studies of Central Bank of Sri Lanka as the 6th installment of the public lecture series of the year 2022. So today's speaker is a familiar face for most of you. She's Dr. Anladas Bandaranaike, former Assistant Governor of Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Madam, we warmly welcome you for the session.
Thank you.
Okay. So, well, before moving forward, let me take you through the structure of the webinar and mention some housekeeping rules too. First, the speech by Dr. Bandaranaike will go on for approximately 45 minutes and will be followed by a Q&A session, which would be moderated by Dr. PKG Harishchandra, Director Economic Research Department of Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Doctor, we warmly welcome you too. Yes. So,
thank you, Kusan. Thank you.
Now, this webinar is currently being telecasted via Zoom and also via Central Bank's official Facebook page. So participants can interact with us and send us your questions through the Q&A option in Zoom. And if you're joined by Facebook, you can write your questions as a comment in the Facebook page too. So we'll be sharing a survey link also to obtain your feedback on the program towards the end of it in the chat box. So a very small survey indeed. So please be kind enough to let us know your opinion through that survey. That's a kind reminder. Now, without taking much time, let me introduce the speaker today, Dr. Bandaranaike to you. Dr. Anladas Bandaranaike retired as Assistant Governor of Central Bank of Sri Lanka in October 2007. And prior to that, she served as Director of Statistics, where she introduced provincial GDP statistics for Sri Lanka and conducted the 2003 for consumer finance and socio-economic survey in all 9 provinces, including LTT held areas after a lapse of 20 years. She served on the Council of Open University Sri Lanka from 2008 to 2011, and as a board member of the Center for Poverty Analysis from 2014 to 2019, and as the chairperson of the Committee on National Information for Evidence-Based Decision-Making from 2015 to 2018, and as a member of the Delimitation Commission of Sri Lanka from 2015 to 2020, and currently as a board member of the Federation of Environmental Organizations since 2021. She continues to pursue her personal and professional interests, particularly raising awareness on socio-economic and environmental issues for sustainable, equitable development in Sri Lanka. She holds a PhD in statistics from Cornell University, USA, and MSA in Applied Statistics from Oxford University, UK, and BSc First Class Honours degree in Mathematics from University of Colombo. She began her professional career as a postdoctoral research fellow in the Department of Biostatistics, Harvard University, US. So with that rich introduction, let me invite Dr. Bandaranaike to commence her speech. Over to you, madam.
Thank you, Kushan. Let me just share my screen. 1 minute. Okay, does that look okay?
Yes, madam.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I will be talking today, as you know, the topic. But before anything, I would like to say good afternoon to everyone and thank the Director, Center for Banking Studies, Mrs. Dimuthu Samaratunga, and the Central Bank of Sri Lanka for having invited me to speak to you. It is a real pleasure to be back with the Central Bank after so many years. It is also so satisfying for me to see the promising young and new officers at the time of my retirement 15 years ago, like Dimuthu and Dr. Harishchandra, in senior positions of responsibility at the Central Bank now, doing such good professional work in very, very difficult times. Now, before I start, I would like to mention that especially now when the situation is so bad, you hear everywhere, you hear this statement, we must protect the poor, we must have social safety nets. But if you ask people who are the poor, how do you identify them, you get silence. In January this year, I was at a meeting where I had to make a presentation on protecting the poor to political parties, both in the opposition and in government, at a meeting on our debt situation. And, all these politicians kept saying, oh, whatever we do, we must protect the poor. So when I started, I said, okay, do you know who the poor are? I mean, there was dead silence. And one person mentioned the HIS survey, but basically, I don't think anybody had thought about how do you identify the poor. So I'm going to start by setting the stage and talking a little bit about that aspect before I get onto the social safety nets. So to begin, there's no single definition of social safety nets. So I thought I'd stick with Wikipedia, the broadest one, which defines a social safety net as consisting of non-contributory assistance to improve lives of vulnerable families and individuals experiencing poverty and destitution. And examples given are contributory social pensions, in-kind and food transfers, conditional and unconditional cash transfers, fee waivers, public works and school feeding programs. And if you know the history of Sri Lanka, we have tried many of these methods. The World Bank also states that social safety net programs protect families from the impact of economic shocks, natural disasters, and other crises. Sri Lanka has had such social safety nets funded by several donors. The World Food Programme, the World Bank, UNICEF, Save the Children Fund, to name a few, for years. Yet, with all this support, in a country with mostly arable land and plenty of water for irrigation, it is shocking that 70 years after independence, 2 million of our people were suffering from food security in 2019 before the pandemic. In this crisis, 2 years later, the numbers are very much higher. And I think there have been some studies done on just how bad it is. So in short, Sri Lanka has never put in place a system that we could manage on our own, always depending on others outside to support us. Today, Sri Lanka is at its most destitute economic level in post-independence history. Of course, in the midst of feeling very sorry for ourselves today, we cannot forget that several more people died or lost everything they had in youth insurrections of 1971 and 1989, in ethnic violence in 1983, a civil war of 20 years till 2009, and terrorist bombings in 2019, I think due to state negligence. But this time is different because the country and the government have no money, neither rupees nor dollars. Most people are without livelihood and means of income, while skyrocketing inflation is leading to unbearable costs of living. Most likely, we will have to face further economic deterioration before things can get better. Our social safety nets have failed to protect us from this economic shock and the several crises this country is currently facing. Contrary to what the World Bank has said, we now have to think beyond the Wikipedia and World Bank concepts of social safety nets, as all past norms must be critically reviewed and revamped to meet these appalling new circumstances. And the entire concept of social safety nets for Sri Lanka must be rethought in that context of a country on its knees with, country can't be bankrupt, but virtually in bankruptcy. So I would first like to set the development basis on which I believe we in Sri Lanka should rethink our future social safety nets. So first, a little background, let us look at our world today. 70 years ago, post-World War II development emphasized a consumption-led development model. The idea was that if you encourage consumption, the production of goods and services to meet that consumption could be used to rebuild literally Europe, basically, after the war. Then resources served 2.5 billion people's needs. Since then, technology has grown exponentially. as have populations and incomes, and with any half seeing how the other half lives through technology, the internet and social media, wants have grown. And at the same time, we have seen our poor planet, fresh water, forest cover, the ozone layer shrinking. We now face climate change and global warming. And now these falling resources in a much depleted planet have to serve 8 billion people's wants. Though I think the consumption model has passed its use by date, rampant consumption continues globally. And we see everywhere, as we see in Sri Lanka, this widening gap between the haves and the have-nots, and with it, the rising frustration, the intolerance, and social unrest that has accompanied that widening gap. So in that context, there has been a paradigm shift in the development focus. Then, all those years ago, the focus was on material well-being, how you live. And if you look at the old UN reports and the World Bank, it was an output consumption wealth, GDP, turnover of businesses, profits of businesses, the bottom line, trade volumes. Those are the indicators that were looked at for development. The focus now is very different. It is on the overall well-being of people, their access to education, their access to health, their access to decent jobs and living wages, human rights, gender equality, both in the workplace and in education. And these are now measured by very different indicators, like the Human Development Index as an example, which looks not at GDP, but per capita GDP, and it looks at longevity, how many years you live, and it looks, I think, at education. Sustainable development goals cover all the things I spoke about: access to health and education, gender equality, reduction of poverty, environmental issues, access to safe water, safe sanitation, etc. So the target today, especially to minimize the social unrest, is for sustainable development with social justice to improve people's overall well-being. And I think the crisis has made it very clear that a country's development is not about numbers, but about how the economy can provide the necessary goods and services to ensure people's livelihoods and improve their well-being. And that is what we have been unable to do in recent times in Sri Lanka. So what do I mean by all these words? Improving overall well-being, I think we can't only look at material, there's intellectual, and there's emotional. Material would mean your food, your housing, your transport, your communication. Intellectual, access to decent education and to employment that is productive. And emotional, a sense of personal safety in your community and in your country, and a sense of freedom to practice your traditions and beliefs without impacting on other people's freedom. And sustainable development means improving that well-being on all dimensions while safeguarding the environment and our resources for the future, so that future generations too can improve their well-being in an environment where the previous generations have not destroyed it, so that there are no more resources left. And social justice means all opportunities and access for improving well-being must be impartial to human differences, whether it is the color of your skin, your race, your religion, your gender, your political affiliation, or your social status. Those should not impact on access to opportunities for improvement. As to whether people use those opportunities is another matter, but the access should be there. So when we talk of poverty, vulnerability, and destitution, we have to think in terms of overall human well-being, not only income as in the past. So now, how do we apply this to Sri Lanka's situation? And to do that and to understand what this crisis has done to us, I'm looking at employment shares, economic output shares, and foreign earning shares. If you look at employment, our public sector, probably the largest relatively in the world, is 15%, and they have a form of social security in the terms of non-contributory pensions. Unfunded, government has to support the pension scheme. The formal private sector, defined as any business of 10 or more people that abide by the labor laws and pay EPF, ETF, is about another 26%. So about 40% is the formal employment sector of the economy. The other almost 60% is the rest who have no social security. And that, if you look at any sector, if you say, let's take agriculture, the paddy farmers, the vegetable farmers, even tea, plantation agriculture, 60% of tea is in the hands of smallholders. These are all informal sector. The fishermen. Then if you look at industry, construction, there are a few large construction companies, but the majority of construction are small-time contractors who hire daily paid skills, masons, carpenters, electricians, plumbers, etc. And if you look at transport, goods and people, the three-wheelers, the office vans and school vans that provide transport, all the vegetables and the fish and the rice that comes into economic centers all come from the informal sector. And when you look at the entire hospitality industry, whether it is the little restaurants and boutiques on the side of the road feeding people, or the salons and the beauty salons, the haircuts, everything, it's all in the hands of the informal sector. And these are not poor people. These are middle-class people who have been earning good incomes, especially in tourism, where all kinds of tourist accommodation was available when we were doing well all over the country, all in the informal sector. And then the migrant workers, who I estimate are about 20% of the labor force of 8.5 million, about 1.7 million people working outside and sending money in. So basically, the backbone of the labor force is the informal sector. When you look at economic output, the formal private sector share, including the, I think, almost 300 listed companies, is less than 40%. This is my estimate of economic output. And if you add the public sector to that, it's less than 50%. The informal private sector, again, is the majority, produces the majority of our goods and services. If you look at the foreign earnings share, I was amazed to find migrant remittances in 2019, 2020. 2020, it had gone down because of the very silly fixed exchange rate policy. But remittances were 7 billion in 2019 and 2020. 2021, it went down. And the net exports of goods and services, including your garments, your tea, all the earnings from tourism, port services, IT exports. And if you take away the import content of the garment industry, it was 11 billion in 2019. And in 2020, when the tourism went to zero, it was 9 billion. So the order of magnitude of what the migrants were sending into this country was about the same as our entire export of goods and services earnings. So you can see that what a large share this informal sector in the Sri Lankan economy plays in this situation. So now, having looked at that as a backdrop, let's see where we are today. So I'll first start with material well-being, and all the information I'm taking is out of is pre-crisis from the Household Income and Expenditure Survey of 2019. And you can see from this that in, let me use the, 1 minute. Let me use my, I'll use the cursor, 1 minute. Go back to the previous slide. You can see that over 90% owned their own house or didn't pay rent, and 90% had permanent materials for their housing, that is roof, walls, and flooring, and almost 100% had electricity in their homes, 90% safe water, safe sanitation, and communication in the form of TV or telephone. In addition to that, they had labor-saving devices, consumer durables like fridges and fans and cookers in 60 to 70% of households. Cooking gas was used by 40%. That means 2 million people were using cooking gas to cook. So if you look at the position, look at my last line, 10% of households, those that didn't belong to this 90%, were the ones who were materially poor in terms of their housing conditions. But check the last line of my table, 60% were living beyond their means and were in debt. Now, if we go to income poverty and deprivation, and let's again, these are all from the 2019 Household Income and Expenditure Survey, a brilliant job done by the Department of Census and Statistics. The median monthly income in 2019 was 53,000 rupees for a household. And that meant more than only 50% earned more than 50,000 a month. And the poverty line, based on a 12-13 consumption basket, was 7,000, roughly 7,000 rupees per person per month. You could live just at the poverty line with 7,000 rupees per month at that time. The income poverty head count was 14%. So about 3 million people out of our 22 million lived in poverty. However, the multidimensional poverty head count, which looks not only at income poverty, but looks at health conditions, education conditions, and living conditions, whether you had access to safe water, etc., was higher at 16%. And as I mentioned earlier, 9% of our people, 2 million, suffered from moderate to severe food insecurity, which means that on a daily basis, they either had no money or did not have access to adequate food for their nutrition. And if you look at my points below the table, you will see there were wide variations across districts. Multidimensional poverty head count was over 40% in Vavonia and in Nurelia, and 11 districts had 20%, that is 20% of people in multidimensional poverty. Food insecurity was as high as 24% in 1 or 2 districts, and 11 districts had more than 10% food insecure. And there were wide variations in access to safe water, public transport, hospitals, and schools, as measured by how much time it took for the household to get to safe water, to get to the closest bus stop, hospital, or school. So that is the situation we were in. Now, let's see what the government social safety net did during this time. So the social safety net is handled by the Samudri or Divinagama program. And in 2021, according to the Central Bank annual report, 1.8 million families. Now, Sri Lanka has about 5 to 5.5 million families. So this is 1/3, 33% of families were getting Samudri benefits. Mind you, poverty line is 14%, but 16% even if you take multidimensional, double that were getting Samudri. Then let us look at how they were identified. The Welfare Benefits Act put out a gazette in June 2019 using with HIS data with 22 criteria, very sophisticated system on how to identify the poor. It looked at their income, their expenditure, their electricity bill. It looked at health conditions and education conditions. It looked at their living conditions, where they had safe water, safe sanitation, electricity, and it looked at whether they had any assets to support their livelihoods. For example, whether fishermen had boats or whether farmers had tractors. 22 criteria to identify who the poor were. Now, with these 22 criteria, the poor became twice as many as the poverty line said, because of for whatever reason. Now look at this. 23,000 Samudri workers are in 14,000 Ramanilladari divisions to look after 1.8 million families. If you do the arithmetic, you divide 1.8 million by 23,000, you will find that there are only 78 families for each Samudri worker to look after, whereas a Gramalilladari in 14,000 divisions looks after 5 times as many families, 393. And even worse, 55 billion was the total, this again from the Central Bank annual report, total provided to these 1.8 million families. So if you do the arithmetic, 55 billion divided by 1.8 million divided by 12, each family got the princely sum of 2,550 rupees per month. And mind you, this was against, you needed 12,000, the poverty line is 12,000 If you multiply by 4 for a family, 50,000 was what was needed to help with the poverty. Here it's here. Meanwhile, migrant remittances brought in, as I said, the 7 billion. And if you assume the 1.7 million workers and 1 worker per family, migrant remittances gave each family 65,000 rupees per month, which was above the poverty line. So basically, and I'm sorry to be so harsh, the Samudra program has been a farce to address poverty, and migrant remittances probably provided that level of material well-being that we see. Now, let's look at other kinds of well-being. Intellectual well-being, which I'm talking about, education and employment and health. Life expectancy, 76 years, as good as any middle-income country, literacy rate over 90%, enrollment rate, and we have gender equality in Sri Lanka, 95%. And as a result, education in the population is almost 3/4 people have more than secondary education. The dependency ratio, and that dependency ratio, this is very important because I want to show you that the labor force does not reflect the high health and education indicators we have just spoken about. The dependency ratio is the ratio of the non-working to the working age. So if it's for, say, 50%, that means for every 1 non-working, that is the children under 15 and the people over retirement age of 55, for every 2 working, there's 1 non-working, the ratio is half. Now look, the labor force participation rate is only 50%, which means that among the working age, for every 2 working age, only 1 chooses to work, chooses to be in the labor force. So when you combine the 2, for any 3 people, 1 is in the non-working age, and of the 2 who are in the working age, 1 does not work. So you have a ratio of 2 non-working to every 1 working, a 200% ratio of non-working to working. And that, as you can imagine, is a very tough call for people to earn enough livelihoods to support 4 when this is the ratio of non-working to working. Meanwhile, so basically labor force does not affect the health and education indicators. Now, if you look at the unemployment rate, it's only 5%. That looks very good. But it covers a lot of sins, because what has been happening in Sri Lanka is, it's not that the private sector, informal or formal, is expanding and tickety-boo with everybody getting good jobs. The government has been hiring, as you can see with the Samudra workers, and I'll show you some other startling numbers later. And every year till the pandemic hit, 200 to 250,000 workers were migrating, skilled labor. There were housemaids, there were people working in factories, and drivers and masons and carpenters, engineers, accountants, everything. And that is what gave us the low unemployment rate. So that is not something that is reflecting the health of our economy. So what have we been doing all these years? Sri Lanka has lived on a champagne diet with a Kasipu income. The welfare programs have been many, as I said, cash transfers, nutrition, school uniforms, subsidies, fertilizer, bread at one point, poorly or not targeted. When my son was in a government school, we were also given school uniforms. All the central bankers with children in government schools, we could afford to buy uniforms. No, we got free uniforms. So either poorly or not targeted at all, fertilizer is not targeted at all, bread was not, etc. Then we have train and bus transport, electricity, fuel, or gas, all priced well below cost. The outcome has been that the electricity board, the petroleum corporation, government railways, bus, the SLTB, let's forget about Satosa, all incurring huge losses borne by the government. And we, the people, have been happily, complacently using these resources. And now when the fuel has gone up so much and the gas has gone so much, I don't hear people complaining about the price. They are just so grateful. They stand in queues for 3 days to get gas and fuel, not complaining about the price. Then we have free state health and education services right through university. And that, I believe, is an absolute human right. And everybody is entitled to health and education. However, the country spends on this, our taxers and government coffers spend, and there is no return if the educated leave the country, as they are doing now, many of them, because they see no hope for the future, or they do not join the labor force. No goods and services are produced from their from their education, and no return to the country. That again has to be thought through. Bloated, inefficient public sector provides these services. 1.5 million employees with a 846 billion wage bill. I'll talk about that later. And Samuddi. Agriculture has Goviniyamakers from the Agrarian Services Department and agricultural instructors from the Department of Agriculture, all supposedly supporting the farmers to over 20,000. Electricity Board has over 20,000, but we know that I already spoke about some of the agriculture is the least productive sector. The budgetary costs of these 1.5 million employees, their salaries, their transport costs, their allowances, sometimes housing, and the costs of non-contributory pensions. Like I said, now we'll see what the Kasipu income has done to the champagne diet. Let's see the government budget. So we have, I'm giving 3 years because for 2022, there was data only up to February. Don't want to embarrass the Treasury by asking why there's no data out there. Just, there's a lot of numbers here. Just look at the revenue. 1.9 trillion went down because of very idiotic tax cuts. We lost about 1/3 of our revenue. Just look, recurrent expenditure alone exceeded revenue, and in 2020 and 2021, almost double revenue. If you just look at the wages and pensions alone, here you have 900 billion against 1.9 million revenue. Half of revenue went to pay wages. By 2020 and 2021, 2/3 of revenue went just to pay the wages and pensions. If you look at it another way, if you add the interest and the amortization, debt servicing, 2 trillion versus 1.8 revenue. Revenue was not enough to meet our debt servicing. By 2020 and 2021, it was closer to half our debt servicing. And you can see the outcome, deficit went up, increased by 50% in 2 years, and government debt went up. Government has been borrowing to meet recurrent expenses. Forget the capital expenditure to build, roads and ports and some useless ports and conference centers, and debt servicing alone higher than all revenue. So that is the situation this country is in. So the impact is now everybody is on a Kasipu diet with Kasipu income or no diet. Shortages because we have no dollars, or you all know most of these things, but I want to emphasize. Fuel, gas, intermediate inputs, all not there. So employment losses in the informal sector, farmers can't farm because there has been no fertilizer, and even if they farm, they can't get their goods to market, no transport. Fishermen can't fish, no diesel. Construction workers, either there's no cement and no steel, or it's so expensive, people are not building. Transport, there's no fuel, either for goods or people. Tourism and personal services, and either there's no gas to cook in the restaurants to feed the tourists, no transport. So the livelihoods of the 60% in the informal sector are gone. And in terms of economic output, no livelihood, so no output from the informal private sector, and all three sectors affected by no transport because no fuel, because everybody can't work from home, people can't get to office. Foreign earnings losses, migrant remittances, $1.5 billion were lost in 2021 because of the 200 rupee exchange rate. And I'm told even it used to be about $600 million a month, migrant remittances. I'm told now it's around 200 to 300. Tourism, as I said, all the earnings from tourism lost because of no transport, no cook, no gas, no electricity. And because of the fertilizer ban, export crops have also gone down. So this is where we are today. And one more to rub it in a little more, the cost of living. A household in Sri Lanka is average size of 4, income earners 2, with either 2 kids or a kid and an elderly. And I just did a calculation of a simple breakfast of bread, pulse ball, a plain tea and a plantain. Lunch and dinner cooked once because there's very little fuel, of 1 kilo rice, 500 to a kilo of vegetable, 1 tin of fish, condiments and coconut to cook. And this is, mind you, for 8 meals, 4 at lunch, 4 at dinner. It came to 1,200, 1,300. Then the food to non-food ratio in poor households is 50%, 50%. On average, it's about 1/3 to 2/3 among the poor. They spend more on food. So you need another 1,200 per household per day for transport costs, for your utilities, for schooling, etc. children's shoes, etc. So 2,400 into 30, 72,000 rupees per household is needed today in July to survive at the poverty line. With 2 income earners, minimum wage of 36,000. Now, if you take the official poverty line, which was 12,440 for the month of June, that is 50,000 for a family. You need 2 income earners, 25,000 per month using the 2012-13 consumption basket. My belief is if you update this with the 2019 consumption basket, it will come closer to my figure. So the bottom line is minimum wages to live at the poverty level are between 25 and 35,000 rupees per income earner per month. And the table below just confirms what I said. Inflation went from just under 5 in December 2020 to 14 end of last year, and by now it's 60. And if you look at the prices below, you know it's going to go up. Gas doubled, diesel 4 times, rice, bread, milk powder, egg doubled. The cheapest fish salia, I got 860 from the indicators of the central bank, but when I went to buy salia 2 days ago, it was 1,000 rupees for a kilo. So this is the situation we are in today. So unsustainable policies and expectations of all our people, all of us, we are all to blame for this. No money, multiple crises, we don't need to go into that in detail. And what has the outcome been? Loss of national and international confidence. The local business people are taking their businesses out. They are not willing to invest here. Foreigners are not willing to invest here. And even to lend money in the local market, I think treasury bill rates had gone up 30%, which means the government has to borrow at high rates because people are not willing to lend. And international, we have not been able to find lending from international markets because of our sad debt situation. So we need urgent and difficult reforms and a change in mindset. So against that background, I will now talk, that is the background against we have to look at our social safety nets, remembering that vulnerability is not only about income. So in the short term, first thing we have to remember, government has no money, surviving on borrowings. So what can we do? But we can't neglect our most vulnerable, the 10 to 15% who are really deprived. So for that, we probably need to seek the donor assistance of friendly folk like the World Bank and the World Food Program, but set an exit mechanism to ensure that this is transitional, that over time, these people are given a fishing rod to catch their own fish rather than over and over again fish. And I think even the donor agencies will be happy with that kind of approach. Then obviously, you saw what a fast Samudri is. Reduce the expenses of the Samudri system. Why cannot we use the Gramaniladalis and the primary healthcare and the school systems to deliver nutrition, to deliver the medication and to see the things? Why do we need another layer of 23,000 people that are costing the state so much? So we have to rationalize the delivery system. Then that is for the really vulnerable. Then the lost livelihoods. As I said, 60% of our people who are earning good salaries now can't do anything because of their livelihoods being completely lost. So we need to obtain somehow 500 million per month of US dollars bridge financing for key imports that will allow all those people to get back to work and start earning. I spoke to somebody in the tourism sector. He said, Anila, if tomorrow they bring the fuel and the cooking gas, we can still have the best season ever. People want to travel and they will come. Sri Lanka is such a beautiful country. So this is a huge priority. And then we have to remove the price and wage anomalies, remove all subsidies, let the prices reflect the cost to the country, adjust all the prices, including, in addition to what has been done, what I said, the bus fares, the train fares, the electricity, everything. However, we can't just leave the people now, really. Minimum wages have to be raised above the new poverty line, and in the private sector, wages, everywhere, wages to be tied to productivity. It has to be linked. And of course, raise the direct taxes to increase the revenue so that we can meet all these needs. So that in the short term is what I would suggest, targeting the most vulnerable with donor assistance, but exit mechanism, reviving the lost livelihoods. And if the livelihoods are revived, then more goods and services in the market, supply will be greater for demand, and prices could come down. And of course, the anomalies have to be moved, because we cannot go on forever on this champagne budget with the Kasipu diet. Then in the long term, first let's look at livelihoods and incomes. Think fishing rod, not fish. Eliminate that dependency. Everybody is looking for a handout. Even the big businesses always asking the government to, forgive the debt, tax breaks. I mean, that period is over. We can't afford it. And we have to raise that 50% of labor force participation to meaningful jobs. And I'll speak a little bit more about that, because we have only 30%, 35% of our women are working. Why? Because the public transport is bad. They can't get to work, or the cost of childcare and elderly care is too much for the earning they can make. So we have to have higher wages and create a situation where more women will join the labor force. Then sustainable development, innovation, entrepreneurship, startups. I know of young people who don't belong to the formal private sector, who are making money hand over fist through innovation and entrepreneurship and startups all over the country. And that has all got killed because of this situation. And gainful employment, as I said, for women. Then we have to think school curriculum, because you have to encourage the analytical thinking, because there's not enough, there's a lot of rote learning, lot of regurgitation of facts, whereas people have to be problem solvers, and they can't, be waiting for government jobs doing nothing, in half these government organizations. They have to be able to think and work for themselves and produce. Financial literacy must be there, because we know that all over before the COVID, you would see restaurants popping up, little shops are popping up, and after time they close. Why? Because there's no feasibility study done. The man next door is doing a successful business. Another man starts the identical business, and then there's not enough of a market for either, so both go under. No financial literacy. And communication skills. How much more people can earn in the tourism industry or in the IT sector if we had better English and IT training and computer literacy in our schools. So that's another long-term thing. And private sector engagers. One is decent wages linked to productivity, and the other one is the updating of these archaic labor laws. I think the Shop and Office Act has working conditions for women like from the 19th century. It's kind of, it's bizarre. It's so old, that act. And even the TEWA, Termination of Employment of Workers Act, which doesn't allow you to hire and fire. So without looking after the workers' rights and creating a law that allows hiring and firing on reasonable grounds, what does the private sector do? It circumvents the law by hiring on contract, so that if the worker is not good, you just don't renew the contract and you overcome these archaic laws. The private sector has to engage the management with the workers and the government and get these archaic laws changed so that you can have gainful employment. And then that's on livelihoods and incomes. Let's look at other types of vulnerability and deprivation. What are the types? Food insecurity and malnutrition. Safe housing, safe sanitation, safe drinking water, safe cooking fuel, and access to public transport, to healthcare and schools. So think programs to address food insecurity. Sustainable nutrition programs can be done through the maternal and child health clinics and through the schools. And I'm saying this because I'm currently involved in a school meals program, and what a lot I have learned about what can be done if there is a commitment. Then planting material for food gardens in schools and homes. Department of Agriculture should be, I must tell you, I've been trying to grow vegetables at my place. And I went to 3 different government-owned agriculture planting material shops. And in all 3, among 3, I got 1 packet of bandaka seeds, 1 packet of karavila seeds, and that was it. They had nothing else. So at a time when everybody is trying to do some, small home agriculture, home gardens, the agricultural authorities do not have material to give us to go ahead. So you can have programs that can address the insecurity and the malnutrition. And surely in a country like Sri Lanka, you should have zero malnutrition and zero food insecurity if we use our natural resources. Then programs to reduce regional variations in access. To save sanity, it's only 10% that need this. To public transport, to healthcare, and to type A and B schools. I don't even want to get into education. 10,000 schools in the country, of which 3,000 schools have less than 200 children. You know, how can those children ever have, that's another issue of access. So these can be done. Again, there we can use donor funds at reasonable rates and put the systems in place without wasting money on, white elephants, as we have done in the past. We won't go into that. There are programs that can be done to reduce the regional variation. We have done a lot. The B roads in this country have improved tremendously in the last decade, but more to be done so that that 10% we saw in multidimensional poverty, now it must be 25% with the crisis, can be addressed. So those are the long-term things we need to do. And the government cannot do it alone. Remember, our government is bankrupt with no hope of money in the near future till the IMF program comes in, after which I hope international bilateral and multilateral donors will come in to help us. So we have to help ourselves. And for that, the corporates and individuals can organize and promote, because unless we do this now, we can't wait for everything to fall from government hands. We can see where it has got us. Sustainable nutrition programs in schools, sustainable community-based food security, again, creches and daycare centers that will enable women to get into employment and earn something for their households. And elderly care, I forgot, we should have creches, daycare, and elderly care. Sustainable community-based ecotourism. I'm involved in a project like this through my environmental group. And that too, to raise female labor force participation. English and IT classes in vulnerable areas to raise employable skills. Provide fishing rods, not fish. And I think a lot of corporates can do very, very solid CSR programs of this kind, where many of the companies have their factories outside of Colombo, not in the periphery. And even if they have their factories in the periphery, there are very poor schools in urban, congested, low-income urban areas, where you can link up with the school and provide the resources for these kinds of programs. So then you reduce the malnutrition and you reduce the food insecurity. And if you can get the community, the creche and daycare and elderly care centers established through the community organizations that are already there all over the country, you can get more women to work. And if you do home-based ecotourism and culinary projects, and we have, the tourism sector, there's a huge market for selling Sri Lanka's cuisine, for selling Sri Lanka's crafts, for selling the experience of living in a village home. You can sell these ideas and enable people to earn good incomes. But of course, all this depends on the gas and the fuel coming in. And of course, English and IT classes. These are things that can be done by non-state players who can support the Sri Lankan situation. Now, in summary, social safety nets must recognize Sri Lanka's current bankruptcy and handle it from there. Whatever nets we put in place have to target to support only the most vulnerable with an exit mechanism, which ensures that by the end of the period of support, they have a rod with which to fish, and we are not permanently giving them, dry ration, baskets of dry rations of lentils and rice for 6 months and expecting them to recover from their vulnerability. That won't sell. Rationalize the administration and delivery. We have to really look at what that Samruddhi program is doing with 23,000 people. Remove all price anomalies to reflect costs And along with that, we can't do that without creating decent work with livable wages and social security linked to productivity. Donor dependence must reduce over time. We cannot forever expect other people to help us get out of the mess we have created for ourselves. Thank you. Shall I just get out of this? I'm ready to take questions, ready to take alternate points of view. And let me just get out of this. I'll stop sharing. Okay. I hope I didn't wrong.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Bandaranaike, for your very timely and well-researched and very straightforward presentation. So I'm sure the audience got a very good understanding of the issues associated with the safety nets in Sri Lanka and the status of their design and implementation. So before I begin to the Q&A session, as we already heard from Kushan, that our audience can submit their queries through the Q&A option. So we will allow written questions, not voice questions, live questions, in the interest of time. So please get your questions ready. So until then, let me try and summarize the major takeaways from Dr. Bandaranaike's talk today. It's very difficult task to do though, but let me try. Because she covered many aspects, wide-ranging aspects on this theme. So as we know, so despite Sri Lanka's several poverty and inequality achievements, the pre-crisis status of the people was already concerning. So we've been commended for our efforts to poverty alleviation over the past decades. But so there are some growing concerns that many of these expensive achievements are likely to have been somewhat reversed in recent times. So Dr. Bandaranaike eloquently presented the paradigm shift in the focus of development away from traditional quantitative aspects such as per capita GDP, turnover, profits, and all, towards more qualitative aspects, as also outlined in the Sustainable Development Goals. Dr. Bandaranaike also brought to attention the issues in the existing safety nets, including the insufficient quantity of assistance and lack of targeting, inefficient implementation, etc. We also heard that the deprivation exists beyond incomes and extends to issues such as quality of education, access to sanitation, clean drinking water, good nutrition, and many others. Also, Dr. Bandaranaike rightly noted that going forward, considering the limited fiscal space, the government won't be able to entirely finance such safety nets, and we will need to seek some fresh resources or some financing assistance from multilateral lending agencies. I think the government has been able to secure some of this assistance so far. So going forward, I think we need to capitalize more on that because the fiscal space is very, very limited at the moment to provide this much needed assistance. So this situation, all in all, will require us to rethinking these safety nets, and also by focusing on an effective targeting of such measures and development of new initiatives that are not reliant on government budget to ensure efficient and sustainable outcomes going forward. So I would like this phrase that Dr. Madanayake used, the champagne versus Kasipu budget, and giving a fishing rod than the fish. So effectively, the focus now ought to be providing people an opportunity to some safety ropes that can pull people out of poverty than to focus on safety nets. So for that, I suppose we will need to look at raising the skill sets of people and ensuring their overall well-being to augment their productive capacity. So I suppose, I summarized sort of broadly the points that Dr. Madanayake was highlighting. So with that, let me turn to the Q&A session. So before I take questions from the audience, I would take the liberty to use my authority to, as a moderator, to ask a question from Dr. Madanayake to begin with. Doctor, as you know, an undercurrent of Sri Lanka's vulnerable and deprived population is the large majority of our population being in the informal sector. So while informality could afford some flexibility to labor markets and the economy at times, this seems to be becoming a bigger problem, especially in crisis times like this. So I would like to ask, what are your thoughts on this, and what would be the way forward on addressing this issue of informality, as you touched as well in your presentation?
I think there's two ways of looking at it. One is, I think globally, the younger generation are no longer as interested as perhaps ours and your generation were in going into a formal large company where you rise over time. They want to be their own bosses. So, and they are many of them, the entrepreneurial class, are very successful, earning very highly, going into IT related and all kinds of tourism related projects, and they are not poor. Of course, this situation of vulnerability is very different what we are facing now. But the difference between other parts of the world and Sri Lanka is that we don't have a system with which to know who they are, to organize them, because our business processes are so archaic, so user unfriendly, and so complex that even to register as a business, to get the licenses, there, people want bribes. It's not a one-stop shop. So if we can ease that system and have a very simple, very efficient way of registering these quote informal businesses, say every construction worker, then you have a way to identify who they are, where they are, what they do. And you also have a way to expand your tax net. One of the problems in this country is, and I have to say, I spoke to a senior treasury person who told me very few doctors and lawyers pay their taxes. And we all know that you pay a lawyer and doctor often in cash, so that they are not recorded with the taxman. So if the professionals in like that don't have the tax culture, then how can you expect the Mudalalis in PETA, who do billions of rupees worth of business, to pay taxes? So we have to bring that tax culture in by widening the tax net, by simplifying these registration and licensing processes to make it easy. A lot of people just can conduct their businesses without. So then they no longer become informal because they are recorded somewhere, even small construction workers. So I think one way is to recognize that not everybody is going to join a big company, because that is not the way of the new generation, but to recognize that there has to be some recording of these new activities and a new look at how you define work, and then they become formal, but a different kind of formal. So I think that has to be looked at. I mean, I'll give you one example I know of. It's an interesting example. Apparently, the process to get a liquor license is very, very complicated. And the excise department does not encourage the liquor licenses because everybody is selling liquor in all the little tourist places without a license. Excise department people come in and they're paying bribes at every level to the excise department. They don't come in and charge you. They don't take you to the courts for not having a license. No, they get money on the side. That's how the system works. So we have to plug those loopholes. If there are laws, if there's a rule about licenses, then the law must apply. You mustn't have that as a way. So that's one example where the licensing system is meaningless. Somebody is making money out of it as opposed to encouraging, so that's one extreme example. So I think the licensing process has to be simplified, rationalized, and the loopholes have to be closed so that there is no rent seeking and no giving off, every sector of this economy, the rampant corruption. I had another slide on that. I didn't have to, maybe I can share it with you. We have to recognize, and that has to change. That has to change. So if you want a long answer, I can show you my extra slide. Okay. So I think that's one way. And formalize what is called informal. Does that make sense? Did I answer your question?
Absolutely, Doctor. I think, we need to have more systems, efficient systems with less human intervention.
Sorry, let me interrupt immediately. This country needs less systems, less government organizations. Frankly, there are 1,300 government institutions and so many for agriculture, so many for this, so many for that. And the sectors that do best are the ones that have the least government interference. I think you have to have less institutions, but the ones that are there have to be efficient. Like when I analyzed for this talk, I found you don't need Samudhi. The Gramalidharis and the primary healthcare workers can do the work of the Samudhi officers,
That's right. When I refer system, Doctor, now it's more like with some use of some technology, digitalization of processes,
yes,
and of that sort.
Yeah.
But the additional layers would add more inefficiency into these so to speak systems. You're right.
Yeah, but also I'll just add one thing from a recent example. Now look at the digitalization and the registration system for fuel. I mean, it is not working because the 2 months the government did nothing. 3-wheeler drivers got used to standing in a line. They're all selling the petrol, not all, most of them at 3,000 rupees a litre in the black market. They have 2 months. It only took 2 months for them to work a system that gave them more income than plying their 3-wheelers for transport. Now the government can't break it. The government can't break it, and this digitized system with the registration is not working. So, even if the system is there, I mean, I see there's policemen, there's Air Force, Army, all hanging around the stations, and the 3-wheeler drivers are running the show. That we have discipline with the system. But you're right, digitization is one way to do it. And you can do it through a very good administrative system that we have. The whole Gramanidha system can be done. You're right. Yeah.
I mean, let's not lose the hope of, digitization would really, these are like, I suppose, not normal times, under severe shortage of fuel. I can't think of any system that would properly work.
Yeah.
But, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, great idea. But along with putting the system in place, the authority should have also instructed the 1,000, however many shed people and the forces who are supposed to be in discipline, how to act with this system. I mean, nobody, I went 3-4 times to this, maybe they don't even know what the dates are. It's just so bad.
Right.
No follow through on a good idea. I think that's the follow through is very poor in this country.
Absolutely. I think I quite agree. I mean, I don't know if you have heard that in certain parts of the country, in a northern area, without all this digitization and all, simple fuel card has worked properly, efficiently.
Yeah.
So it's about the implementation and the follow through. I can't agree more with you.
I heard about an East also. Yeah.
That's right. So, Doctor, now I got another question about now. So you also mentioned about this exit mechanism for some of the recipients.
Yes.
So this is something that we've been discussing for years. But I mean, can you shed some more light on how you think that such an exit mechanism should be developed and implemented? Because this is, I mean, politically very difficult thing to do. And we've been trying that with lots of measures have been done previously as well, but to no avail. Can you, Doctor, please share some thoughts?
I
How we
think
do
that
yeah.
I think the exit mechanisms, you can't, I don't think in a country like Sri Lanka, you can have the same exit mechanisms for all over the country, because conditions are very different, the types of employment that can be done, etc. But I think there needs to be somebody, I mean, let's see, one idea would be where in today's world, there's a lot of interest in the environment. So you can have, I don't know very much about it, but like debt for nature swaps, where funding will come in, like the carbon credits, similar, where funding can come in, where in these are very beautiful country with very beautiful parts of the country which where funding can come in, where just remote communities, if they just restore, maintain the environment, they can be paid for it. Then so that would be in say tourism related or areas like that. In other areas, you have to see what kind of resources and talents Ayurveda, where in different areas, different kinds of fishing rods could be given with the fish. And that's why one size won't fit all. So that you have to give and even the safety nets for short time, I don't think it should go to the homes. It should be sent, say, okay, what do you want? You want them to have nutrition and you want them to improve their earnings. That's the bottom line. So for nutrition, if you can do the school programs, not with funding from outside, but I mean, I'm involved in one of those where the community supports and the principals and the teachers support to have a school program. We are trying to do something where it's a follow-up with a little farmer program where the schools, these are remote schools which have land, or they don't have, with a sustainable food program where the food is from the area, so that the nutrition and what the social safety net gave, like the handout, you don't give cash, you give it in the form of nutrition, health, supplements, etc. At the same time, looking to see what kind of economic activities would bring in returns. And in today's world, especially in Sri Lanka with tourism, there are so many things that can be done, all over that can earn good income. I mean, I go to wild places in retirement, and it's amazing what young people are doing to earn money through, tourism-related activities. So I think in the urban areas, a little more difficult, but I think it needs a lot of planning, and it needs people who are genuinely interested I mean, you need a team, and, in every province, maybe something could be done. At district level, but I think it's doable. You just have to find what will work in a particular area and push that. The crafts that are dying out, the cuisines that are dying out, lots of things that can be done.
We need some change in sort of our thinking pattern,
Yeah.
and so central, like centralized policy making wouldn't also work. I mean,
you have to do
in that aspects, of course.
Yes. Sadly, the whole provincial, what is that 13th Amendment didn't work, but I think people in areas know what they want, and you have to get out of this dependency. Andu hamadema, they know business won't work anymore. The Andu has nothing to give, and the political culture also very sadly is on patronage. People, they go to the politician for the child schooling, for the transfer, for the government job. It's that culture, unless that changes, we can't go anywhere really. Yeah. So
but one more question, Doctor. So you also mentioned about this the entrepreneurship and startups, innovations and all. So that is the area is something that Sri Lanka seems to be struggling with for a while now. Despite that, we have a lot of investment in our education and we are providing free education up to a tertiary level with some limitations. So what's really sort of stopping us, and what sort of can be done to kickstart this area
I
and
think
to help in relation? I mean, that is one way of getting people out of this deprivation. I think if we do that in a sustainable way.
I think a lot of the interesting new things are coming out in the IT sector. This is not an area I know too much about, but I think that perhaps, when you look at how our banking sector works and the financial sector, still, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think funds are given out for the feasibility of a project. Everything is backed by asset-based collateral. Am I right? It's still asset-based collateral. No?
Yeah.
So there's no knowledge in the banking sector, the lenders on the not banking, the whole financial sector. So some of these ideas that young entrepreneurs come with, banks also have to take a risk. There's no physical collateral. They may be working from one of these spaces, where they don't even have a building. So I think that kind of change has to come where innovation, innovation funds, even private sector people who are willing to take a risk should work with these young people. And actually, when you see, I'm a tech dinosaur, but even during the last 3 months, when you see the kind of stuff that is done on social media, some young people out there are creating these things and they are incredible. So there's a lot of talent, there's a lot of ability. I know people who have set up IT officers here. They work in the US and they say the talent is incredible. But for people to get going on their own, there has to be a better way for them to get the capital to start. And for that, I think we need a much more sophisticated way of looking at these kinds of startups and things. Or you have to get like venture capital from outside to look at the new ideas. That may be one way to get the funds in. Venture capital, you get the young people, encourage that kind of thing. I think there is a chance there.
I think it's happening in certain areas, Dr. As you quite rightly mentioned, the IT sector and
agriculture sector. There's a lot of potential for efficient agriculture. I mean, the traditional agriculture is so inefficient. It's mostly done for tradition, not to earn money. Most farmers are doing another job, working on construction sites and all. So there's a lot of inefficiency there, and there's modern techniques of agriculture. This school, I work with a research organization with my school meal program. A bunch of us are doing it, and they are trying all kinds of innovative stuff which they are hoping to take to the schools for more efficient agriculture. So there's lots of agriculture is another area, new technology, new thinking,
That's right.
And I think another point that another very critical thing in Sri Lanka is what I said about the structure of the economy. You see, this informal sector is really the backbone. But when you look at what the leader, the decision makers, they are always having meetings with the chambers, with the leaders of the large corporates. And that is, that's like, sometimes I think from the colonial era, the thinking. They don't really listen to the younger voices, the more entrepreneurial voices who are doing lots of exciting things. And all the decision making is very much influenced by some very old-fashioned ideas about tourism and, how the country should develop. And, there's so much exciting stuff going on. And these formal corporates are the ones who are on the economic councils and, most of them over 7, my age or older, must get the young voices, listen to them to move change in this country. Yeah.
So one of our viewers is saying that there are some angel funds which are operating in Sri Lanka to assist the startups, and I think we can sort of capitalize of all these options. And one, I mean, Doctor, if you take a long-term view that the poverty and education, I think or income levels and education are obviously positively correlated. Then so if you have more education, you can have more income, and your poverty will go down. So education and income level will have a very positive correlation, and then education and poverty will have an inverse correlation. So why, I mean, if you take a long-term perspective, why our education system, even if we be providing all the free education, why we not being able to get into a level where some of our competitor countries or regional peers would have achieved in educational attainments? What's the problem with our education system, and what should change?
I think there's two things. One is, first of all, I must say that with all the problems our education system has, still, I think in Sri Lanka, one way of judging development is whether each parent can think that their child will have a better life than they did. And in Sri Lanka, still, because of free education and free health, children who are willing to work hard and who are able can go through the system and get to the top of their professions in this country, whether it's the law, whether it's medical profession, engineering, etc. So the education system has given opportunities for children from all income levels to get to the top. And today, when you look at the professionals around, they do not come from elite backgrounds. They have come up the hard way and are doing exceptionally well. However, there are the negative things are, we are still stuck in that old rote learning, all the facts about what Parakrama Bahu did. True, we must be proud of our history, but we have to look forward. So two things, and I think Education Department has addressed some of these. One is remove the rote learning and teach analytical and problem solving. Second is basic, the English. English has been neglected for so long. I did a mentoring program with university students, and one of their biggest problems was not having English. So the English, it's been a farce. It's just like what I said about Samudaya. I'm sorry to be so harsh. It's all a joke. Lots of countries will give money to do an English program, but you have to be serious about it. You have to train teachers. So there's lots of things that can be done. And the other aspect is the mindset. Parents are pushing children to do medicine or law or engineering without allowing children to do. And today's world, there are so many options. So that is another problem. And going into a government job, it must be made clear that the government pension, by the time a senior civil servant retires, that pension has deflated so much with inflation that it won't even cover your electricity bill. So this having a pension is a crazy and easy way out to go and work in a government job, 1.5 million people, completely bloated. They have to get out of the thinking that that is the solution. They must be a little more adventurous and go into areas where they can do much better. So I think that mindset of parents, Anduwe Rassava, Anduwe what is the pension, give them the analytical skills. So I think one is the school curricula, which have to push. Two is centers of excellence in school. Every divisional secretariat should have a AB school. We have to encourage not to push children at grade 5 to come to the cities and all. That is bad psychologically. So there are lots of things that can be done in the education department to address some of the limitations, even though I still think we have an amazing free education. And the mindset of people, look at the facts I put, look at the situation with this, champagne diet, handouts all over, including a government job is really a handout because the productivity is so low. So I think a lot of things have to be looked at anew. We cannot go in the same old, way we did earlier. It's a lot of ideas, but I think there needs to be serious thought. And we have very capable people in the public sector. It's just that they're not given a chance to have a say and to voice an opinion and come up with new ideas. So,
right. Yeah, absolutely. So maybe a little, very short question about the fuel black market. The question is, what do you propose to counter this fuel black market? Timely and exact solution.
Okay, I saw that. I'm looking at the question myself. You know, the first of all, learn the lesson of what is test on. Basically, the government has put a system in place where there are days. I mean, if people are foolish enough or desperate enough to go and stand in a queue for 3-4 days, and I mean, let me be completely blank and quite crude, most of the main roads in this country are now public toilets because all these cars and three-wheelers are parked. There are no toilets anywhere. The liquor bottles. I mean, if you walk on Havelock Road where I live, you know, it's just rubbish. So if they have been foolish enough to queue for 3 days, that's their problem, not the government's. So a government not putting a system in place on day one is the government's fault. So I would very firmly give instructions to say, these are the dates. Anybody who is not on that number, you know, the last digit, you have the forces and the police there say, please leave the queue. Leave the queue. And say it politely and be very firm. I mean, you don't have to be frightened. I mean, there's enough violence going on with police patterns. Let's not get into that when it's not needed. When it is needed, I mean, the policemen are hanging around. The Air Force guys are hanging around doing nothing there. I see it every day. So 1 is discipline. 2 is firmness. 3, there's a system and nobody breaks it. Nobody is allowed to break it. Even if the president of the country comes, they have a separate queue, all the politicians I heard. Even if the biggest wig comes and says, I'm entitled, no entitlement. It has to be according to a system, everybody equal, and you just discipline. That's all you have to do. And let the government announce over the TV, anybody who breaks it will be put in jail or, you know, remand or whatever it is. And if they want to make a big noise, other people will chase the ones who are trying to break the system. I mean, the fault is the government's from day one. Right from day one, we were saying, why didn't they use the last digit? You know? So I think it's simple. It's just a question of discipline and having some guts to teach people some discipline. That's all that has to be done. And then what about the people who are buying 2 hands to clap? No, if people are, somebody sells and underwear is buying, so I need to stop people. And if they are caught, I saw in the queue near my place, some guy was siphoning up. If they are caught, let the police patrol. And if they are selling, you catch both parties. You have to be firm. Let the remand jails be full of silly people who are, you know, black marketeering in fuel. Can't help. I mean, it's a little amount. It's not going to be enough for anybody, but let everybody have a fair chance at it. This is crazy. Same with the gas. Gas also, there has to be, the other day there was a huge furor. I got myself a clay oven and I'm going to cook on that. Yeah. So I think it's just, these are not the rocket science. You just have discipline and firmness and fairness by all. No breaking queues for anybody. Personally, I think all politicians also should be in the same queue. They don't realize what we are going through. They have another queue somewhere else to send them to, so that they can get to parliament. That's nonsense. They must know how they are representing the people. They must know how the people live. That's my opinion, you know. So anyway.
That's right, Doctor. I think we can have one more question. In the interest of time, I think we'll also summarize a few questions that have come. Basically, they're trying to sort of ask some clarification, sort of explanation from you about this, our labor market dynamics and how underemployment is sort of contributing to poverty. And some, as you also mentioned, we have sort of fairly relatively high share of our public sector in the labor market, which is contributing less in terms of overall value addition. And so what how we can make our labor market more competitive, and catering the demands of these emerging in sort of industries and IT sector, or maybe leisure sector, tourism and all, on the one hand, and on the other hand, this research and development, all these other high-tech areas. So what do we need, and how do we need to change our labor policy and the labor market overall? Dr. I mean, I know it's a very broader question, but and your thoughts would be.
What I said, one is the labor laws have to be looked at. And I think the labor laws are, I mean, lot of the laws, not only labor, but the labor laws, the TEWA, the Shop and Office Act, those have to be looked at in the context of 21st century work. And the Employers Federation, the workers, the unions, they must get together because we want a win-win situation. So if the labor laws, if you give a little more flexibility to the employers to get rid of bad workers, and you also ensure that the workers, that the salaries are tied to productivity, that I think, so basically labor laws is one area. It's a long-term thing. It's not going to be solved overnight. That's one. Second thing is, I think we have had minimum wages for years. Now, of course, it's a crisis situation, but the minimum wages meant nothing. And I was aghast at the starting salaries in the private sector, in the formal corporates. I mean, I don't know, I would love to know how much is paid to these workers in the supermarkets and Pizza Huts and all run by big corporates. And banks, I heard that banks, 15,000 rupees a month trainee salary won't cover that young person's bus fare even. So the private sector salaries have to be linked to productivity. It can't be a one-way street. It has to be linked. And that is something the workers, and it can't be confrontation. It cannot be them versus us. People must recognize that this is to be a win-win. You have to give and take a little, raise salaries, but linked to productivity. That is for private sector. Because in the informal, what I call the informal sector, because I know people have been there, highly efficient systems, well paid. Now I'll give an example. All the big hotels wanted government to give handouts. I know small hotels that ran very efficient systems. After COVID came, for 2 years, they paid their workers on the profits they had made. So there are ways to make it efficient. So private sector, one is looking at the big picture. And I think there has to be a recognition in our corporate sector that, again, it's tied to that consumption model. You looked at the client, you looked at the shareholder, and you looked at the client and the shareholder, right? Now, and then what happens is, when if you don't share it with the workers are leaving. They can get jobs elsewhere. So it's not from altruistic reasons. I think corporates have to look at the big picture. I'll give an example. During this time, COVID, I have a few shares in things. There were dividends, big dividends being given to shareholders. And I'm thinking, here inflation is running so high. Why doesn't the management talk to the shareholders, and instead of giving a dividend, give it as a bonus to the workers because of the inflation? Because most, especially the privately owned companies, family owned, big dividends, they're doing well. You can see the thing. Some thinking where the workers are considered as part of the operation, not as a feel-good, do-good factor for your own survival. Otherwise, the workers will leave. So this kind of our corporates are really still in that old colonial mentality, most of them, in my view, especially the old ones. So that's one. And in government, this, especially the political culture, we cannot sustain the size of this government. So over time, you have to reduce, but you can't stop hiring, because then at one point you won't have any. This has to be looked at, and I think workers have to take a cut somewhere, and certainly the pay tax has to come in, because a lot of people in government are doing second jobs because they have time to do it, So I think these are very deep questions that have to be looked at the base, and I think it is now the job of the bureaucrats to get together, sort these out, because the politicians seem to be helpless and in another, they're in a parallel universe. You can see from the happenings in the last few months, they are in their own world, competing with each other to jump into the seat in 2 years. The bureaucrats, like yes minister, the senior, we have very good bureaucrats. We have very good experts. You can hear them on all these programs in TV for the last 2 years. Get groups together, central bank and initiate, get ideas, get younger people, and come out with ideas to sort these problems. New thinking, and recognizing that the political process is a failure, is not delivering democracy. I don't know what it's delivering. It's got us into this mess. You can't only blame the last government. So I think the bureaucrats and the people and the private sector have to get together and move this country forward. That's the only solution in my view. Let the parliament do what it wants.
Thank you very much, Doctor. And I think that's all the time that we have for the Q&A session. And I'm sure that our audience really sort of enjoyed your presentation. And I can see in the responses that have come in the Q&A sort of comments box. So so I personally enjoyed a lot. Always good to have chat with you, and you can speak almost, given any topic that you can speak for hours. That's what I have. And thank you, Doctor, very much. And I think, Kushan, I would like to hand over the floor to you to wind up the session.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me and for listening to all my long rants.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Harishandra, for moderating the Q&A session. A very interactive one indeed. There were a number of questions, even though we couldn't answer all in the best interest of time. However, we will forward those to Dr. Bandaranaike and our physician, so try reaching you again. So with that, we have reached the end of the public seminar. Before the closure of the event, on behalf of Director of Central Bank Studies, let me express my sincere gratitude to Dr. Bandaranaike for accepting our invitation, spending her valuable time with us and delivering this speech. We sincerely believe the speech was an excellent source, force us to rethink on the concept of social safety net, and also there was a number of structural attitude changes that we need to work on. That was very well taught. So, and again, let me thank Dr. Harishandra for moderating the Q&A session. Finally, thank you very much to all the participants who tuned into this webinar today. And we really appreciate that your presence. And apart from that, we got responses to a short survey as well. If time permits, send us your response as well. With that, I'd like to end the webinar. So keep in touch with us for joining our upcoming programs. There will be a number of programs in upcoming months. Keep in touch. Thank you once again and have a pleasant evening. Thanks all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.